And Pauline Hanson joins us now in Canberra, where there's so much fun to be had and a lot to get to, including your great appearance, mate, at the Bush Summit, which I love to see when you were sitting there with my mate Laura Jays in Toowoomba just a couple of days ago. And what I loved, Pauline, about the conversation was that you talked about the frustration normal people have in regional Australia by, you know, the swirls of politicians' BS talk that never makes their lives better. Let's talk a bit more about that now. What brings that to mind? I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes, how you've spoken to people in big cities and small country towns, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who feel really screwed over by the process, don't they?
They do. In a lot of these rural and regional areas, they actually make the money through the mining in Queensland, that these areas make the money if they don't see any of the money going back into these towns for services. So when you see loss of maternity hospitals or services, there's no doctors, they fly in doctors on a regular basis, you don't have the aged care facilities that these people want. These towns are looking very tired, Paul, and if it wasn't for the tourists and those grey nomads going out these towns, they wouldn't have anything at all. So people feel awfully forgotten. Politicians go out there, make all these promises, yet they don't deliver the assets or the resources that they actually need. So I feel sorry for a lot of these people. And the farming sector, where's the support that they're getting? You know, I just feel that they're doing it tough, and a lot of the farmers these days, average age is around about 60, they're telling their kids coming through, there's no future in farming. And if we get rid of the farming sector as well, what's going to happen then is that we will not be growing the food to feed our nation and importing more and more food in the country, which we don't know where the food's coming from. Is it clean? Is the processes? Because we have very strong growing processes in Australia that for health reasons, that best food in Australia.
You'd agree with that, wouldn't you, Linda? The idea here that our politicians often flap a gum, but not much actually happens once you go on the other side of the dividing range.
Look, I don't want to hear anyone talk down to Toowoomba. My friend Rebecca's the Deputy Mayor up there. That council's doing a great job. It's an incredibly strong region and there's great people up there and a great council. So I do want to say, Senator Hanson, that I do disagree with you that some of those regions are struggling. I think they're really thriving. There's no doubt people can have some difficult times, but the regions are thriving and those councils are doing a fabulous job. I do want to say, though, I was in Canberra this week and I got to spend some time with Pat Cummins, who, of course, is our Australian cricket captain, but he's doing a great job advocating for more renewable energy. I know something Senator Hanson feels really strongly about, and he's advocating for funding to help sporting clubs. So I had a great time there with Pat Cummins.
Lovely.
He's advocating for sporting clubs to put solar panels on their roofs because, you know what? It generates energy for them and it generates money for the clubs. And they're great work. He's done it through Cricket for Climate. He's done it through Sport Forever. They're talking about how it can be a revenue source for clubs. It can actually make them money and, of course, do the right thing for our climate.
So Pat Cummins used to wear a giant logo that was in part a fossil fuel company, and because of his disagreement with Cricket Australia, which has made financial losses for the past 4 years, regardless of his achievements on the field. So I'm very pleased that he's saying this at the local level. But at the national level, Cricket Australia is losing money.
But I want to say, you know, Senator Hanson, I hope you agree with the Australian cricket captain that, like, renewable energy is a great source of funding for our regions. It's a great source of jobs. It's a great source of money for sporting clubs.
I think you're just saying that tongue-in-cheek, Linda. It's all tongue-in-cheek.
I was in Canberra with him this week.
To actually put that to me. You know, the only good thing he may have said is that to fund people to put solar panels onto their homes, let's do away with the funding to these big companies, the subsidies that we paid out. I believe it's around about $50 billion, taxpayers' dollars, to subsidise these companies, international companies here in Australia, to fund renewables that are falling over by flies, you know, all these green hydrogen projects, solar panel projects, wind turbine projects that the government's put out there, all falling over, the cost to the Australian taxpayers. So I think it's just a waste of taxpayers' dollars down the bloody toilet as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, they don't work. I don't mind if we subsidise those ordinary mums and dads out there to put solar onto their roofs to help them with the cost of electricity, because there's no way the bills are going to come down, all the promises by the government. And the pensioner said his bill this time last year was $370. Now it's up to $1,200 a year. So how do you tell a pensioner who's actually cannot put food on the table, struggling to pay the rent, or, you know, the mortgage on his house, or the rates, to say that, you know, electricity bills, and that's all because of this Labor government and your carbon emissions scheme.
I mean, that's the thing, Linda, where for the 15 years we've had this conversation, all I've ever wanted was somebody to be honest about the cost of transition, right? Bill Shorten couldn't and got slammed. Albo pretended there'd be a drop in power prices, but it didn't matter. And he ended up in a scenario, despite the fact those power bills have gone up, by improving their vote at the last election. Does price matter at all? I would have thought so, but does price not matter to the average Australian?
Of course it matters. You know, I mean, Labor just won a federal election on, you know, making a whole series of incredible cost of living promises that the Australian electorate voted for, you know, overwhelmingly and historically. I think the real question here, Paul, is what do the coalition think about this? You know, their leader, Susan Lee's commissioned a review. You've got Barnaby Joyce tabling a private member's bill to say that he disagrees
Libs
with action on climate change. No, well, I mean, you've got members of the Liberal Party speaking out about this. You've got Matt Canavan and his Gang of Five speaking out about the current coalition's policy.
It's got to get a disagreement in a party room. Well, but just because Labor runs in the caucus world, we were supposed to believe nobody disagrees ever. You've just got a system where they weld the doors and nobody's allowed to know if someone disagrees.
They're just a shambles, right? Like, you'd think in 2025 they'd have settled their position on this, and they still haven't. They're reviewing it, they're debating it, they're moving motions about it. Like, it's just utterly ridiculous that they cannot accept the science, the truth of it, and get on with the need for a transition. But again, doing it. I mean, Pauline Hanson, I'm glad to hear you agree with subsidies for household batteries. I think that's a great policy. It does save people
Linda,
money.
I didn't say household
it creates
batteries.
cost of living relief, and it can help. Okay, well then, sorry, solar panels, my mistake.
You didn't listen to me properly.
My mistake.
Batteries, you're flat out getting
having
batteries
those
because the batteries have to come from
homes.
China. We're only going to prop up China's economy again because China produces 77% of the world batteries. So, you know, we don't produce this stuff ourselves, Linda, in Australia. So we see so much money going overseas. We haven't got our act together. What was that, another $1 billion didn't the Labor Party put into the solar industry or something? What happened about that? Yep. Is that something else that's fallen over?
That's great. Solar is growing faster than it ever has before in Australia, and households are making money off those solar panels and those batteries.
So let me ask Pauline about what you've thought about the internal discussion inside the coalition. Fairly obvious that, again, the majority of the National Party wants to go one way. I would say a very significant number of the Libs want to stick with where they are because they think that that's about more city votes, etc., etc. Is your view that if the coalition can't work it out, One Nation goes up and up? You have gone up by 3 points since the election.
I think, look, Paul, with all the scaremongering being pushed to one side, people are feeling the effects of the climate emissions and what the Labor Party has been pushing on Australian people. They made these promises that never eventuated. People are starting to wake up now. The cost of living is biting. We've lost industries, manufacturing, the average household, the cost of electricity, plus also the cost of food. All this has contributed to the cost of energy. We're one of the highest energy countries in the world for cost of energy. Now, people are starting to wake up and they're not accepting lies by the Labor Party anymore. And Chris Bowen's policies are going down the toilet as far as people are concerned. Now, the National Party, One Nation, right from the beginning, we have opposed this net zero scam. It's a scam, Paul. And we have opposed it based on information that we have had, research, listening to some scientists, what they've said, you know, what's going to happen has never happened. And what we're doing is we're standing our ground strong on this because the economy of Australia, the cost of living and the standard of living to Australians is more important to me than worrying about what the temperature is going to rise by 2%, on computer modelling in 100 years' time. Let's get real about it. Let's deal with the issues today, now, that we are facing today. And we can't be the global managers when we're only 1% emissions compared to China, India and America putting out 50% emissions. It doesn't sound reasonable to me. And I won't see people living on the bones of their backside, can't pay the bills, can't heat or warm the houses, can't put food on the table. For what? What are we doing it for? For people to make a lot of money out of it? No. So what we've done, we've stood our ground. People are starting to wake up. So they're actually now realising that One Nation is the only one with the true policies and common sense, and people are coming across the One Nation, but we're putting pressure on the National Party and the Libs to actually wake up to it. Otherwise, people are going to vote for One Nation.
I'm with you. I'm with you. All right, now let's talk here about... I support, this may be surprising, everyone's sitting down, I actually quite like the idea about the 5% home loan stuff. I said it back when it was an idea a couple of years ago, and I stand by it now because when I was there in Hobart just a couple of nights ago, and by the way, Pauline Lee, what a darling. I've never seen somebody actually look into somebody's eyes and listen to the people around her like she was, so well brought up. But we have this experience where I asked the room, hey, put your hands up if you're worried about your kids getting a house. Keep your hands up if you're willing to vote for a political party you've never voted before if it would help your kids get a house. Everyone kept their hands up, right? So I think it's a very live and open issue. But I was interested about what I understand are some of the limitations of the policy, right? Which is first home buyers, but then it's single mothers. But then there is another group of people who, let's talk about this here, which could well be a divorced dad, right? And a divorced dad who's lost half of what the house used to be, maybe a little bit more because of the kids, and they've got to have somewhere to live as well. Linda, put simply, why isn't it just a little more blank here? Not to say everyone in every circumstance, but rather than pretending it's a lifeboat on the Titanic where it's women and children first, what about anyone in a distressed circumstance qualifies?
Look, Labor's got a national housing accord with all the levels of government trying to build more homes in every state and territory. They've pumped, obviously, public money into achieving more social and affordable housing in many states and territories that is targeted towards women and children because overwhelmingly women and children are the victims of family violence and is one of the strongest predictors of whether or not someone is going to be sleeping rough.
So what about the bloke who's in his 50s who, for want of a better term, has lost it all because the relationship fell apart? Don't they end up in a scenario?
Labor's trying to build more homes for everybody. We know we need that nationally.
I'm talking about the 5% here, that's all.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's really important that we recognise that Australia needs more homes, and we're doing lots of trials, again, in states and territories. Tasmania, there's a Liberal government there, but, you know, modular housing, lots of different ways of innovating to actually get enough housing for people to live in safely. That's an aspiration every government should have.
But, Pauline, again, this 5% scheme, and I understand some of its complications, some of its issues, but if we're going to start carving out, again, I want everyone taken care of, but sometimes that also means the person in a relationship who has, for want of a better term, lost it all, they should be able to find a way back into the housing market as well.
Of course they had. You know, I've said this all along, Paul. A lot of men are treated wrongly in this country purely for the fact is they are men. And, you know, they talk about domestic violence. Yes, the stats say that, you know, men are the perpetrators of domestic violence, but not all men are that way. But we tend to be out there pushing for women and their kids all the time. There are men and their kids as well, but they've got nowhere to go. There's no housing availability for them. So I think that should be fair right across the board based on an individual needs basis. But, Paul, this 5% that you're going to give them, the problem is Labor is, and you're talking wanting to build the houses, Labor started this problem and has continued it with high immigration coming into the country. Now, we're bringing in 1,544 people a day now. That's over 563,000 people a year we're bringing into the country. That is your problem with the housing. Not only that, Labor Party promised that they would actually stop foreign investment of our housing for 2 years. Has that been done? You know, this is something I'm chasing up. All the promises, until you actually address this, what you're going to do, Paul, is I have grave concerns about this, and they've taken the caps off for the 5% deposit. The medium house price can go from $800,000 up to $1 million plus, depends on where you want to buy it. That means a $40,000 at least deposit onto it. What you're going to do is the financial institution have said you're going to drive up house prices by 3.5% to 6.6%. That's going to drive up prices. So by the time they get in there, the prices are going to be dearer again. So it's a supply
you get enough
issue
supply,
that we have
Pauline.
here.
Not if you get enough supply. And Labor's working really hard on
when you bring in the high immigration into the country, Linda, it's not going to happen. So don't hoodwink the bloody people out there. They're feeling the pinch of all this with the high immigration coming into the country, and people are doing it tough out there. House prices are increasing. You've allowed foreign investment to buy up the housing as well. So people will not. You've got to put them into higher debt, 40-year loans. Then the banks are making huge monies out of these loans, and who's going to be worse off? And then if the interest rates go up,
I'm going to be the host, Pauline. We've got to wrap it up,
and they're going to lose their homes.
Okay,
so
all right. Thank you. I do appreciate it. They put me back on screen while I was waiting for you to finish. My apologies.
Right,
I didn't mean to appear rude on screen then. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Linda. We'll see you again very, very soon.